Hey guys, it's Nick here. Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick and part 1 of 2 to the next Walking Dead What If story. What if Merle spared Gargulio? Now, this has been a what if that I've been waiting for quite a decent amount of time to do. But before we get into that, be sure before you get into the video to smash the like button, subscribe to the Omniverse, and further acknowledge and support the future of the Omniverse by checking out the Discord, Patreon, and Google Doc in on the homepage or, channel bio, as well as commenting future requests and what if suggestions in the comments. Now, let's get on to the story. So this is What If Merle Spared Gargulio. Now, I initially wanted to do this story a lot sooner, but a lot of other things got in the way, not only stories, but just real life stuff. And I think it put off my mind, like other stories, like the Clara one and several others, where it just either didn't seem right or I put it off too long. And now, like the What If Morgan Shot Jenny, we're getting to those kinds of stories. Stories that I put off forever and just never did. So, this is going to be a two-parter, and it will give Gargulio, a very small character who had very big potential in that one little bit of an episode clip, and give him I'm just going to say this right now, hint for future potential. Because, like Dwayne, it's not going to be the hugest you might think, but he's definitely going to get time to shine. So let's dive in. For those not familiar, Gargulio was one of the governor's men in the town Woodbury and was on the mission with Merle, Tim, and Crowley to hunt down and kill Michonne. But that didn't turn out too well because Tim and Crowley got sliced and diced, Gargulio almost got murdered, and that left Merle and Gargulio to fight Michonne by themselves. And they couldn't even get but one gunshot from Merle on her. And Gargulio somehow survived a slice of the sword, which kind of set up for him being a big character. But unfortunately, the second that Gargulio started to adapt to what Merle was telling him, want to go after Michonne, he adapted more in 2 minutes than almost the entirety of seasons 1 and 2 combined in just the few minutes that he was introduced. But unfortunately, this posed a problem. Merle's place at Woodbury, because Gargulio admitted that while he wasn't going to not only go after Michonne still, he wasn't going to lie to the governor about what's happened either, which would have put Merle's place in Woodbury in jeopardy. So, with that in mind, Merle just came up with a clever lie about looking at the birds and shot Gargulio point blank in the head and wasted any potential for that kid's character. But with me around, we're going to be giving Gargulio that chance that he should have realistically gotten, even if it were to not only live not just a season, but at least a few episodes longer. It would have made for an interesting dynamic of a kid adapting to very dangerous situations, especially in the apocalypse. Think about it, and especially in the Walking Dead world. Trust me, this kid deserved a lot of time to shine, and that's where I come in. So let's dive in. This is where we're going to set up the change. Right after Gargulio saves Merle from getting bit, after Michonne escapes with all the walkers and stuff after slicing Gargulio and all that. So all the damage before then has happened. So, Gargulio saves Merle, and then Gargulio tells Merle that he's going to keep going. And then, they have that whole argy-bargy. And then right when Merle says Gargulio right, and says his name, because that was another thing, he never said his name right. This is where he would initially kill him. But this time, he doesn't. Let's just say instead he threatens to kill him. They're going to keep going. Fine, fine. They'll go after Michonne still, but on the condition that nothing else is spilled. Because Gargulio's not only messing up his place in Woodbury, but he's messing up his. And Merle says, "You want to keep going after the girl and possibly get ourselves killed? Fine, fine. We'll go after her. But under my observation, and nothing else about this is spilled." So he threatens that if that ain't kept, he's going to make sure that Gargulio joins Tim and Crowley on the ground. And Gargulio accepts. At least he's getting half of his wish. And then Merle pats him on the back and says, "You come along pretty quick." I mean, he would have already said that to him, but, extra reminder. The kid could use some motivation still. He's already got plenty of it going. So, we then cut to Glenn and Maggie at the place where they're going to get the formula at the little area there. And Merle sees this and pulls Gargulio aside again. This is like the third time, by the way, and says that, remember how he said he was going to follow his orders? And he's the boss here. He has a hold on him if they're going to continue this mission. Now, there's no sign of that girl Michonne anywhere, but he knows one of those people there, that kid. His name's Glenn. He's going to handle this by himself because that guy over there knows his brother. And Gargulio's going to wait over here until Merle gives the signal. No running off, no trying to hunt for Michonne on his own, no going back to the governor. He's going to stick right here until he gives a signal to come out. And if he doesn't, then Gargulio comes rushing at them and kills them both. And yes, that's understood. And Gargulio, again, understands. So, Merle has that whole talk with Glenn and Maggie. I say talk, but it's more of an awkward situation until Merle gets a hold on Maggie and says that they're going to go back to Woodbury now. And then, while he's holding Maggie at gunpoint, he then raises his knife hand slightly up and hits it against the car, sort of like a signal. So he's still holding Maggie. It's just awkward now, but he still has the leverage. And even if he somehow let his guard down for that minute, Gargulio comes out, weapon in hand, and now we have Merle holding Maggie in place while Glenn is at gunpoint with Gargulio. Although I couldn't really get a proper image of Gargulio holding a gun, so this is the best you're going to get. So now Glenn knows that Merle's not alone. This was a setup. And now Merle has Maggie there and once again says that he's going to... They're all going to go back to Woodbury now. And yeah, soon enough, they're not only going to tell him where they're hiding, but he's also going to tell him where his brother is without fighting him. But just before they're about to get in the vehicle and leave back to Woodbury, like canon, Gargulio there says that he's not going. He's going to stay behind and track down Michonne personally. Merle's like, what? And then he gets up close to him and says, why? Because Gargulio doesn't feel comfortable with her around. She could track them back and get them in more trouble, if not kill one of them before they even leave. Standing right here might be a bad idea. That's why Gargulio's staying behind. Even though Merle told him to not go off on his own, if they both go back, he doesn't know how the governor will react to Gargulio, since he's all injured, and he might still rat on him, so Merle doesn't fully trust Gargulio, but he still has respect for him, because he's just a kid. So Merle thinks long and hard about this. On one hand, Gargulio staying behind means that he might just get himself killed by Michonne. And Michonne could use that to just come back to Woodbury and kill him. Because Gargulio was part of their team. Or, on the other hand, Gargulio could still rat Merle out. And it's a 50-50 on trusting the kid. But, Merle at this point has begun, sort of, to change, And Gargulio, I feel, was sort of a step towards that. So he ultimately agrees, but says that if he dies, then that's on Gargulio. If Gargulio dies, that's on him. He chose this. And like he said, that if he doesn't do this right, or pulls something that he shouldn't, he'll just be joining their dead friends back there. So, Merle takes Glenn and Maggie like canon just a few minutes later than canon, and takes him to Woodbury. Not a few minutes later, an injured Michonne steps out, sword in hand, and sees Gargulio. She overheard the whole thing. She was right there. But Gargulio says that he's not going to kill her. And Michonne's holding her blade like, what? And he points to her wound, and then he points to his. He says, look, we're both injured. I initially didn't even want to do this. I didn't want to have to go out and fight you and track you down. If you were up in that tree, I'm the one who said that we should all get out of here. I didn't want to mess with you. But you forced me to evolve to something I'm not. A killer like Merle Dixon. I might be following him around, but that doesn't mean that I want to, because I know he's just as bad under the influence of the governor. I think this is Gargulio conflicting with multiple personalities, like wanting to obey the governor, beginning to see that there might be some kind of side to him, and wondering what kind of effect it has had on Merle. So, I think a lot of that would rub off on the fact that he used Merle to go back to Woodbury just so he could try to form an alliance with Michonne. And he also says that if these people knew Merle Dixon's brother, then maybe they can get his brother back from that prison that they were talking about. And maybe, stop the governor from doing something crazy. Because from how everything is sounding, it's starting to feel like there might be something up. And Michonne begins to even say a little bit of this herself. And now, starting to get a mutual understanding of why they're both out here, and that they're both equally damaged. They both got a wound on them, and Michonne starts to lower her blade, but she's still very on guard. She doesn't care if this is a kid or not, because she knows what this kid is like. He changed multiple times, and this could be just him conflicting again. But she ultimately drops her guard completely down and says, fine. And says more about what those two, that Glenn and Maggie people, about talking about a prison, and that, yeah, honestly getting Merle's brother back and telling him what's going on might be for the best. I mean, she don't give a frick about Merle at all, but, it could potentially just devolve this whole situation. And honestly, Michonne looks at the formula as the only reason to go back. Or just go to the prison in general. If not, she would strike Gargulio down where he stands. So she gets at her sword again and says that if that formula wasn't there on the ground, she would kill him right now. But they do have a mutual understanding and alliance to be shared. But if he tries anything, she will slice and dice him worse than both of his friends and worse than Merle Dixon. And Gargulio says it's not the first time he's been threatened, and he can live with being threatened again. But they do have an alliance here, and they can make it work if they work together. So the both of them set off. They both end up at the prison with the formula in hand. Except since this is a few minutes later, Michonne has to be supported by Gargulio, who can't really help her that much because, he's a lot younger. But he is able to just as well have to support himself because they're both injured. So they're both equally as injured and almost passed out by the time they approach the gates with the formula. So will Rick have better trust with Michonne with Gargulio there? And what about Merle and Glenn and Maggie? Will that go all the same? And with Gargulio knowing Merle and everything trying to get the formula and Daryl on their side to get Merle to understand, since Michonne knows all about the governor, could this lead to the governor being thwarted earlier? Find out in the finale and second part of What If Merle Spared Gargulio.